1917. For main reason only, the cinematography was amazing. This is the first time I've kind of seen a movie where you were like, kind of like felt like you were there, like you were standing right behind the person watching all these events occur. It was just amazing. Like it was kind of giving you like almost like a first person perspective of the events, which is not what you really see. Um, I've also like it felt like almost like a video game. Do you know when you're playing a video game, there's a cutscene and that's way more engaging. And for me, I was like, I've never felt so engaged in a historical movie where I was like, oh my god, there's like an explosion about to happen, and you kind of like, wow, that's what an explosion probably would have looked like if you were there to like in World War One. So for me, I was just like, this movie is. So I've not watched loads around World War One to be honest, but I was like, this is definitely going to be an area that I need to look a little bit more into. So the acting, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. There's two main characters. So you have one character called Corporal William Schofield and one character called Corporal Thomas. Thomas is kind of. Do we give spoilers? Should I give spoilers in this? I guess so. Why not? It's reviews, whatever. So Thomas gets killed like maybe halfway through the movie, and you know, the death scenes are hard. You know, like you have to make it not look cringy, but you actually have to look like you're dying. And I think Dean Thomas just smashed it. He did a really good job of bringing his character story to an end. Then you have George McKay, who's like the character we follow from like the beginning of the film to the end, and he was really good. He did a great job, like, because he's by himself, so he's running through all these motions of fear and like anxiety, and you're there, like you actually feel like you're witnessing him like going through all these different panic attacks and mustering up the courage to carry on with the mission because it's so important. So for me, the acting it was 9 out of 10. It was brilliant. Cinematography, I've kind of already explained why, but this is the first movie and probably the only movie I felt like I'm actually here watching these events occur before me, so I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Screenplay wise, it does a good job of keeping you engaged. I think that's mainly because of the cinematography, but there's just so many hurdles that the main character has to go through, and every time you kind of think, oh, he's going to catch a break, something comes, he runs into an enemy, there's mines, there's ambushes, there's rats, just like occurrences that you wouldn't expect. So for me, the scene that really kind of sticks out is where they're in the underground barracks of the enemy's camp, and there's a tripwire that kind of gets set off, and that explosion occurs, and it almost kills the main character in like pretty much one of the beginning parts of the film, and you just don't expect that so early on, and it just like hooked me in. It actually felt like, wow, that just came out of nowhere. So there's a lot of shock moments in this movie, and they're utilized very well. So that's why I'm gonna say that this movie is an 8 out of 10 in terms of screenplay, because you're just engaged from beginning to end. You don't know what's gonna happen, and you generally feel like, you know, he might not be able to succeed in this mission. It's just way too hard. Soundtrack wise, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I think this is one of those movies where that soundtrack made a big difference. You know, before that tripwire went off, there was a build up in the background music. They were playing the right kind of notes, and you were like, something is about to happen, but you don't exactly know what. So it did a good job of building up to the suspense. Production design, I'm gonna say it's a 9 out of 10. I'm not a World War One expert by any means. I've not even watched that many World War One movies, to be honest. But the way I kind of pictured, you know, like the tunnels to be during this time period, the way you would expect your own military camp, enemy military camps to look like the Germans, you know, it looked pretty accurate to me. And I also liked the bit where they have the Sikhs in a truck. I think, you know, that was a good little insertion, because it kind of showed that World War One wasn't just Germans versus the Brits. It was an international, tragedy that everyone was involved in, and it kind of made the movie bigger than it would have been without that scene. So in terms of historical world building, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Just because I don't want to say it's so good, because I don't really know that much about the era, but also because it's a fictional mission. So I guess in terms of like actually making you feel like it's part of your that this is a real World War One movie, yeah, it nails it. But it's not really history. It's more of like the producer was saying that these are various stories he's heard from his grandpa, because who's a World War I veteran, and he's just kind of mimicked different events that would have occurred for a World War I soldier and brought him to life. So, but overall, it's a 7 out of 10. It's still a very good World War I movie. She didn't want him to go. He gives her the last of his food. There's like a baby. He gives it a bit of milk, and you're like, that's a great thing for him to do. But you're also like, what is she gonna do when the milk finishes, right? Like, there was like, there you just like, this is not gonna end well for her or the baby, and you're just like, but it was like, but that's what I mean. Like those small touches, it just makes the movie seem so much more real. No, it probably wasn't historically accurate at all. No. Kesari. So this is about the Battle of Saragari, where 21 Sikhs fought against
10,000.
Afghanis. It was a very remarkable battle. These 21 Sikhs from the British forces were they were able to hold off this huge number of Afghanis for 8 to 9 hours, which allowed enough time for the British force that were around the area to muster their forces, gather all their equipment and weapons, and prepare a solid defense. And it put an end to that kind of rebellion that they were facing at the time. So and it's a story that it's pretty well known because it's probably known as one of the biggest last stands in history, but it's never really been portrayed that well in film. And I think this is probably the first attempt I've seen it where I was like, this is a very engaging but also semi-accurate depiction of probably what occurred for these events. So I just think, like, as a Sikh myself, I would love to see more Sikh historical movies. But I also like to see that, because a lot of time in Bollywood movies, Sikhs don't get portrayed correctly. So, but in this movie, they kind of just nailed everything, and I appreciated it. So acting wise, there's a big Bollywood star called Akshay Kumar. He's the main lead in this movie, and he does a good job. He's very hit and miss with historical movies, but with this one, he did a really, really good job of playing the sergeant of the 21 Sikhs. That was a real historical figure named Ishar Singh. So he was a sergeant who gets relocated to the fort of Sargari, which is kind of like in the middle of nowhere. It's just kind of like a messaging center between the two larger forts. So he just gets sent there. Nothing ever happens there, and that's where the big attack happens. So I think everyone did a really good job. It's hard to kind of, because there's 21 characters that are being portrayed on the screen quite regularly, but you kind of do get a good feel of each character's background, and I think everyone did a really good job in the acting department here. So it's going to be an 8 out of 10. Cinematography wise, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The final battle was amazing, but it was about 45 minutes, just that one battle, and it was engaging from the beginning to the end. There was different military tactics used. There was a lot of realism, and I think just the shots of showing how big the Afghani forces were at that time versus how small the actual fort is. It was just done. There's a lot of zoom ins and zoom outs that were used very well. There's a really good opening scene in this film where the Ishar Singh, he's like who's the primary character. He sees the Muslims about to behead a girl because she doesn't want to go back to her husband or whatever it is. And he's a character of high moral values and ethics, so he goes disobeying the commands of the British officers and goes and saves her. And then obviously the Afghanis get quite angry. They're about to kill him. They're hitting him. They're beating him up. And you can see, like, no one really, like, there's other Sikhs there. They want to go and join the battle and help, but the British are not letting them. And then once the Afghanis threaten to kind of like take his turban off and disrespect the religion, that's when you see all like kind of order break loose. The Sikhs don't care what the British have to say at this point. That's when the opening scene shows that Sikhs are very loyal soldiers up until you disrespect their religion, and then they will just go and fight for whatever they think is right, regardless of their commands. So I think that was a really good way to build the whole kind of theme of the movie. The main criticism I have is with terms of cinematography was the panning shots when they're scrolling from left to right, it was a lot of motion blur. It was kind of getting very blurry and a little bit difficult to watch at times, but that was my main criticism in terms of cinematography. Screenplay wise, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Like I said, it's a very engaging movie. It's a really easy to understand film. It gives a good historical background of all the events that are occurring, but it does like the Bollywood thing where overpowers the good guys, I guess is the best way to put it. So it was very realistic till about the last 15-20 minutes, where all of a sudden these soldiers that would generally just die from a stab wound or a bullet wound, like they've been the whole film, turn into like superheroes. Like they're getting like there's a bit at in the movie where the primary character he's been stabbed about 20-30 times, and he's one man fighting against 300-400 people, and it's getting to the point of not being realistic anymore. Like he's put up a good fight, just let him have a death. And there's another scene where another Sikh is killed by like, I think it's literally about 20 swords going through his body. So it just like overemphasizes like how valiant the Sikhs were, or how much of a fight they were putting up. But I think it was already made clear there was no need to really like overdo it with superpowers. Like, and then the last Sikh to die, who in the actual battle in real life, he gets set on fire. That's how he actually dies in real life. So they set him on fire in the movie, but he's kind of just like not phased by it. He's still like doing battle cries, still carrying on fighting, which again it's I get what they're trying to do, but it's not realistic. And for me, that really broke the immersion and the realism of the film in like the last act of the movie. Soundtrack wise, it's a 7 out of 10. It's pretty standard Bollywood fare what you're gonna get here. The songs are not really needed. This is a pretty serious historical movie. It does really enhance the last battle, so that's why I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It does really make it kind of like build the intensity of the situation, and when there's like an explosion, it really does feel like like the whole fort is shaking. Costume design, 9 out of 10. I think the uniform of the Sikhs is of the British forces and stuff during that time it's not hard to replicate, and they've done it. They've done a really good job of it. They tried a unique style of turban during this time. It's a very large turban. It doesn't seem very practical to me. I don't know how they chose to go with that, but if you look at the World War I or even prior to that images, they do have that style of turban. So it was very accurate. So I appreciated that. The forts themselves, very well done. And I think that's production design side. But the forts really look exactly like I've been to India a lot of times. There's if you go in the villages, a lot of it is not that much more advanced than it was maybe 100 years ago, and you can still see like, yeah, this is exactly what a fort in the middle of nowhere in Pakistan would have looked like at that time. Historical world building wise, I'm gonna give it a 10. Like I've already mentioned, it's not historically accurate, but it is not historically inaccurate either. It's kind of just like does a good balance of it until the end, pretty much, where it kind of gives the good guys some superpowers. But overall, I think it brings the qualities of the British forces to life in a good way. It brings the qualities of the Sikh forces to life in a good way. The only thing is we don't understand why the Afghanis are doing what they're doing, so I think that kind of brings the score down a little bit as well. Yeah. So, and one more costume design error. Akshay Kumar's beard is terrible. Oh my god. It's the worst fake beard I've ever seen in any kind of historical movie ever. It is horrific. That's a costume design error for sure. So the interesting thing about this battle was it's because it was a messaging center. There was a guy who was communicating to the British forts all the events that were occurring. So we do have quite accurate accurate records of what happened during that battle. So they have done a good job of portraying it up until that point, because they kind of just follow the records. Master and Commander, my top choice now. I just watched that recently. It's really good. Started off it got a little bit slow in the middle, but overall a really good film. I've never really seen that many naval warfare movies, but this one kind of just piqued my interest, and I said, yeah, I need to do some more research into, privateers and just how naval warfare was conducted. So overall, I'm gonna give acting a 9 out of 10. There's so many good performances in this movie. I think primary cast, secondary, tertiary, everyone was really good. Russell Crowe, amazing. He's always pretty good, but he's actually just literally amazing in this movie. The doctor, he was really good. He could tell he wasn't into the war side of things, but he had a lot of different emotions throughout the film, and the actor just did a really good job of just filling in every scene really good. And for me, the character, the child who played Lord Blakeney, I think he was really good. Usually children actors are quite cringe, they make them like too cute, too sad or whatever, but this guy had a big range of emotions to portray throughout the whole film. And unless he's like one of those adults that looks like he's 12 or something, he did such a good job. Like, you would not expect that quality of acting from a child. It was really good. Cinematography wise, I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10. There's a lot of islands that they visit in this movie. Everything looks really realistic. There's a trade scene that occurs with the natives of Brazil. Really like that. Felt really realistic. The way they portrayed the small boats and the actual ship itself, that was really good. The opening battle scene is probably one of the best battle scenes I've seen in general. Probably the best naval battle scene I've seen in ever, and then probably one of the best just general battle scenes. It was really good. It was really complex. You kind of understand, because it's quite early on, you don't really understand what's happening, but you realize naval warfare is hard. It's much more complex and complicated than fighting on land, and I think this movie introduced you to that concept really well, really early on. Screenplay wise, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. The plot was pretty interesting throughout. It did get a little bit slow in the middle, like I said, but overall I think it picks up really quickly. Even like the side plots where the doctor is exploring like these exotic animals in foreign lands, I didn't think I'd like that, but it was really interesting. I was like, maybe I need to watch more animal documentaries or something, because I didn't realize this could be so fascinating. And like little side plots like that, it was just really interesting. Another concept I liked that this movie introduced was how when things start going south and things are going really badly, the privateers might start going towards more superstitious thoughts and thinking, someone is cursed, someone is giving us bad luck, that's why all this negativity is around us. So I think that was not really a concept I've really considered before, and then this movie kind of brought that to life in a really good way. And you could really feel the tension in the crew during those scenes when things were just going from worse to worse, and just looked like their bad luck was never going to end. The main problem I had with the movie was, especially early on, there's just too many characters. It's a big ship, and there's a lot of battle scenes, and a lot of storms they have to go through, and they'll be like screaming, "Oh, Mr. Hudley, do this, Mr. Tom, do this," and you're like, who's that? I can't remember. But by the end, you kind of catch up to everyone. But I think early on, it can be a little bit daunting just having so many characters to try to remember. And the battle to take over the Acheron was amazing. That's the big Parisian ship that they're after this whole time. Really good military tactics used there, and I think even the hand-to-hand combat when they take over the ship was really, really well done. 7 out of 10 for the soundtrack for me. Again, not really the thing I pay the most attention to in movies generally, but I did feel like the background music did heighten, especially the naval battles, and there's maybe in some scenes where you're getting a little bit more peaceful music when they're just on the island, after they've been on the ship for a long time, they've gone through a lot of obstacles, and now they're finally on this island playing cricket playing cricket, and just getting a little bit of downtime to just kind of go and do something that's not putting their life in danger. Costume design wise, 9 out of 10. I've seen depictions of privateers before, and I would say this movie's done it better than most. There was a lot of costume changes throughout the movie, and they all seemed pretty accurate to me. So we spent most of our time with one crew, and I feel like they did a good job on the costume design on this end. Like Russell Crowe was the leader of the ship, even though his outfit was similar to all the other higher ranking officers, it did stick out a little bit. You could see like, yeah, he's actually one step above everyone else. Production wise, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. It really felt like you're on a ship watching all these events occur. From what I've seen read online, they actually had a lot of these scenes shot on the open sea. They actually had replica ships created, and there's a lot of effort put into the production of this movie, and it is really evident from the naval scenes to the tropical islands. You can see that the production is pretty much perfect. Historical world building, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I feel like the way the crew behaved, their mannerisms, the language they were using, it was very realistic. You had people on the ship that were fluent in many languages. That was kind of a nice touch. Not everyone would just speak in English. And I feel like Russell Crowe, he kind of just nailed the actor perfectly. He was very, you could tell he's a little bit more educated than everyone else. And I think when you're looking at like naval warfare, there's not much out there. So I feel like this is probably going to be one of the best movies we'll see in terms of building like a whole genre of what a historical movie around naval warfare should look like, because it's pretty much perfect. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.